Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to a Saturday morning shows, the Sports Crib, with our guest from Smash Up Sports, Chris Hawk, and the chef. Hopefully they'll be on soon. But in the meantime, I do have Reggie here, and Reggie, how's everything going this morning?
Great, man. Love talking some fantasy football, man. Love being able to come on here, warm it up for the guys for they get on and do their thing, man. I feel pretty good.
Good. I was wondering, there's been so much made of Tua's third concussion.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate.
And a lot of people are saying that perhaps he should retire. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but well, how do you feel about that? His third. I mean, he's still a young man. He's had his third concussion in 4 years or
Yeah.
something like that, and one of the knocks on Tua has always been his health. Um, just signed a big contract.
Just signed it, right? Like I want to say this is he signed that earlier this year.
Yeah,
I want
yeah.
to say it's pretty new contract.
I would say it's less than 6 months old.
Wow.
Because he did sign it at the beginning of the year. Even I believe it was after the Taylor Lawrence signing, but he got his a proper amount of cash, the signing bonus and whatnot.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So he got his guaranteed money, and properly managed, that could be generational wealth. But
Sure.
Is it health or is it career? The man, he's still a young man. I believe he's 28, maybe something like that.
I feel like you got to choose health, right? I feel like you got to choose health. It's easy for us to say because we're not the ones who spent our whole life playing this sport, working our way up to this point, So I can understand that. It's more of a situation where I just feel like you never know when it can happen again. If he decides to run out there, you run him out there again for another time, and then a fourth one, I don't know. And how long do you hold him out? Not knowing when that next moment could come. I mean, you hold him out for 4 games or so, and then it could happen on the 5th. You hold him out. It didn't happen at all, I don't think, last year. So I don't know. It's just an injury where I feel like you don't really know when the next one's coming. And from everything that I hear, each subsequent concussion is worse than the one that preceded it. So I don't know if it's worth the health, but I do think that's easy for us to say though, James, because we're, like I said, haven't spent the amount of time building up into getting to this level, playing this sport our entire lives. I think you should choose health though. And I don't know what the Dolphins, what are the NFL? Like there's a bigger story too here, James, not just the Dolphins, not just Tua, but the team, the NFL, the repercussions for the NFL if he goes out there and gets hurt again or if he's permanently damaged in any way. I think that leaves a big mark, a big black eye on the NFL that I don't know if it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, that's another thing. Will the NFL let him play? But he does have to be cleared not only by the team doctor, but by the NFL doctor too. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think there's like a team of doctors that are separate from the Dolphins. I think if you're the NFL, you don't even want to get involved in that. I think you should just do a team separate from you. Therefore, if the decision comes down that he can play, you're kind of insulated from any of those repercussions. So that's kind of how I feel that would go with the NFL. If I'm the NFL, I'm really pressing the Dolphins on this decision, not to just rush them back out there.
There's some other quarterbacks that were injured, not quite to the same extent. But Jordan Love injured in the fourth quarter, late in the game. What do you think?
I I like it. The injury itself. So if we're looking at injuries, I'd rather have the concussion than the injury that Jordan Love has in a vacuum. But when you're looking at the two situations, whereas Jordan Love is a newer situation and Tua is a continuation, then I feel like the Jordan Love situation is a little bit better. But I don't like either one of them things. Like it's like, you know what I mean? It's like trash or garbage. It's like both of these situations suck. They suck for both teams. Both teams just paid their guy. They're in similar situations, and both teams just lost their guy within like a 1 week or so here, a week or two.
Now, let's talk about some fantasy implications here.
Yeah,
I mean, now when you look at what happened to the Dolphins, Skylar Thompson does not look like a viable sub for me. What about you?
No, I feel like if you have Hill, I mean, so let's look at it. Let's look at it in the hierarchy of kind of like what the target share would be. There'd be Hill, then there'd be Waddle, right? You got Hill, Waddle. I don't think it means as much for a person like HN, but I think running backs depend on those high scoring offenses. When you're taking a running back like a HN, you're banking on him being in a high scoring offense, getting goal line carries and stuff of that nature, especially with no Mostert there. But I think that the biggest person, in my opinion, that would suffer would be Waddle. When you have the number one receiver, sometimes even in bad offenses, and you saw this happen last year with Garrett Wilson, sometimes that number one guy gets peppered with so many targets that you can still make sense starting him fantasy. Now, will he be the number 2 overall receiver, number 1 receiver? I don't think so. And that's going to be difficult with Skylar Thompson as the quarterback. And if Tua doesn't come back, I think it's going to be hard for Hill to be in that top conversation. But I do think that he's startable. Maybe he drops down a tier or two. Waddle, I feel more sorry for. Like, so for the Waddle owners, in which I am, in I think in one of our leagues, I don't feel so great about it. I feel so great about it, man.
What about Jordan Love and his impact?
Same situation. I think that his situation is a little bit different, and I think it impacts more of a Jaden Reed, because when you look at that those Green Bay receivers, I'm not sure which ones you were drafting, James. But last year I drafted Christian Watson in hopes that he would be that guy there in Green Bay, and he turned out not to be. I am hoping that Jordan Love gets back, because I do have Jaden Reed. I took Jaden Reed on a few teams, so I have more of him than I do Christian Watson. The Josh Jacobs situation is interesting to me, because the running backs I don't punish quite as much, but for the same situation, or in the same sense that I talked about Miami, whereas you don't ever know if they're going to have the same scoring impact, missing their starting quarterback, so you just might not have the points to go around. But I'm not. Josh Jacobs would be the last person I would feel bad starting on here, and I don't know if you could start any Green Bay receivers, to be honest with you. And even Josh Jacobs, I'm not sure what tier he falls down to. He's probably not on the tier that he was when Jordan Love was starting. But I'll take Jacobs over Christian Watson, Jaden Reed. I didn't have much Romeo Doubs. Do you have any of those receivers on your? Did you draft any of those guys?
I had Jalen Reed, but unfortunately, because of my other receivers, he was sitting on the bench.
Same. I had him on one of my benches also.
Yeah. So but I had picked him as a third wide receiver. As a receiver more or less to use on a bye week. I hadn't picked, he wasn't chosen as a starter. But then let's Daniel Jones.
I don't really know if there's much. What is there to say about that guy, man? I mean, is anybody drafting him? Are people drafting Daniel Jones on their fantasy?
No, but they're drafting Malik Neighbors.
Yes, they are. They are.
Including
myself, my friend. I do have some neighbors.
So, as I said, Daniel Jones, because I mean, he is your starting quarterback. You have to, if you drafted him. Evidently, you drafted him high, so you have to play him. What do you do now that you have seen in Daniel Jones?
You got to run with him, right? I think so. I'm gonna equate the New York situation similar to the what I had going on here in Atlanta with Drake London, because I drafted Drake London very early. No matter what Drake London puts up, I got to put him in my lineup at least for the first few weeks here, James. I feel like that's what we're all kind of struggling with when we draft some of these guys so early. Like, you probably don't have somebody that you want to replace that person with. And it depends on your roster construction, because in my home league, it's a 3 wide receiver league. So it can start to get kind of bare bones once you get to the flex position there, if you want to flex a wide receiver. So I feel like you got to start him. Like, what are you going to do? You can't bench him, right? Not like, that's like Marvin Harrison there, even though I like Kyler Murray a lot more. But with some of these guys that put up duds that first week, you spent so much draft capital on them that it's hard to move off of them after a game or so.
Yeah.
So you're running Malik Neighbors out there like he's Jamar Chase, man. You're running him out there this week.
Yeah. So you mentioned Harrison.
Yeah, man.
Like said,
unfortunate first week for him, huh?
One catch on 4 targets.
In one of my leagues, I think he got me 0.6 points, 0.61. Yeah.
But another very interesting situation. Aaron Rodgers.
He was serviceable, right? He didn't look terrible.
But he looked just that split second behind, like you could tell, he wasn't the balls. I mean, some of it you could see the old Aaron Rodgers. The ball was right there where it was supposed to be. Some of it was just that split second behind. I thought it was, to me, and maybe everyone knows, I'm a little prejudiced as far as ayahuasca is concerned, but I thought it was the rust, the fact that he hasn't played, the fact that, no exhibition, no nothing.
It's been about a year. It's a full calendar year almost, right? Close to it. He got injured first game last year.
Yeah. So, how did he look to you as far? He's another one. If you draft him, you probably have to run him out there also.
I don't think you should have drafted Aaron Rodgers. So depending on how let's think about this, James. How deep does your league have to be for Aaron Rodgers? If you're not in a 2 QB league or in a super flex league, how deep does your league have to be for Aaron Rodgers to be somebody's starting quarterback? We're talking like 14 teams, 16 teams. I feel like you got to be in a pretty deep league to be running Aaron Rodgers out there.
Well, this is fantasy, and a lot of people are, like just Aaron Rodgers, the mystique of Aaron Rodgers,
For sure.
Do I draft Aaron Rodgers? Do I draft Trevor Lawrence? You have some guys, that are, maybe you're a New York Jet fan, maybe you're looking for, that Aaron Rodgers of, the Green Bay Aaron Rodgers, so.
I can see that, James. I think the big issue with Aaron Rodgers for me would be the rust, and I can see from a skilled player standpoint if you wanted to draft Aaron Rodgers, because a lot of people want to draft players that have great receivers attached to them, and I believe Garrett Wilson is a great receiver. So a great receiver in Garrett Wilson, a great running back in Breece Hall. You can make an argument for an Aaron Rodgers, but the lack of rushing upside and the lack of he would have to be pretty much MVP Rodgers for me to warrant starting him when you got guys like your Anthony Richardsons of the world, who might not be as good of a quarterback as Aaron Rodgers, but a much better fantasy prospect that you're running out there in front of him. So I wouldn't be starting Aaron Rodgers, but if you are, and that's your only QB, if Aaron Rodgers is your only option, then you got to run him out there, right? Like, I don't know why he would be, but he is. You start him. He didn't look terrible. He just didn't look. A lot of guys look like the rust. Maybe this is the lack of preseason, James, that we're looking at, right? The lack of that fourth preseason game, which a lot of people are now calling week 1 the fourth preseason game because a lot of these guys don't play. They come out here, they're passing for 150 yards. You know what I mean? Like you saw that on a lot of box scores. So maybe Aaron looked a pedestrian, but a lot of quarterbacks look pedestrian that first week. So it's hard for me to really hold it against him. Maybe he comes out second week and looks a little bit closer to the old Aaron Rodgers, you know?
Well, I mean, okay. Let's talk about one of my favorite Ohio teams, the Bungles. What did you think about? Joe Burrow.
Nothing going on there, man. Right?
If you looked at some of the replays, or you had to watch, this was the Sunday game that was on your particular region, he seemed to be holding on to that elbow. It was kind of, there wasn't. There were a couple of spots where it was visible. One time he reached for the ball on the sidelines, and it looked like he kind of winced a little bit. But putting up 10 points against the Patriots. Now, a lot of people do have. Now, you talk about Aaron Rodgers, but Joe Burrows is a serviceable starting quarterback. You got Jamar Chase, who was 6 for 6, but I don't think he got to the end zone. T. Higgins was out. Might be out again this week.
I think he's out again this week, yeah.
Yes, he is out again this week. So what did you think about the performance of the Bungles?
Man, I can't really say I want much market share in this team as it stands. I didn't draft a lot of Joe Burrow. I think I have Burrow on like maybe one team. Like I didn't draft a lot of him for this reason. That's just questionable. You have a lot of fans too analyzing everything Burrow does. How does he hold a water cup? How does he hold a cup of Gatorade? They're analyzing every single thing the guy does to try to read into how healthy he may or may not be. So what some of these guys, what I'm doing is going to wait a couple weeks, as we do subsequent shows. I'm pretty sure I will move off or move closer to or move further away from some of these QBs because there will be a pattern established. You just had so many terrible performances week 1 that Burrow might just be another terrible performance versus like him being the defining guy, But it is concerning when you have players like this, like Burrow, like Rodgers, like Kirk Cousins, guys that come off injuries and don't show up. You're going to get penalized a little bit more than other guys who just may have had a bad game. You know what I mean? I'll take, by the way. Chase, if I'm looking at the Bengals, I would take Chase. But Chase is the only player I like on the Bengals right now.
Well, you would have to take Chase. I think under this circumstance, considering the fact that you have Higgins out, and there were a lot of people drafted Brown instead of Moss. But Moss didn't show you anything as a running back either. So
I was one of those people that drafted Brown instead of Moss. I had him on my team, but I've also now dropped Brown because he was like the first on my drop. You know how you have that guy that's on your list, and you like, if anything pops on this waiver wire, you're out of here. Like, and then he was my you're out of here guy.
Deshaun.
That's great. Now what's going on there? That's we could do a whole show. We could do a whole show on just that subject right there alone, to be honest with you.
Another one comes out of the woodwork. There's a chance if I'm the Browns and the way that he's been looking in the games that he's been giving me, I'm looking to get my money back here. Yeah, hey, you've given up so much to get him,
right.
And if you got no Nick Chubb, We all thought that, I believe a lot of people drafted Jerome
I
Ford.
did. I am running him out there this week. I missed starting him the first week, and I lost because of that. So I'm running him out here this week and hoping he puts up many points for me.
So, did you, what are you going to do with Watson? Are you depending on? Are you thinking that the Browns are just going to be handing the ball off? So if you're running out Jerome Ford, are you all? What's your thoughts on the value of Amari Cooper?
That's where I don't like. I didn't draft a lot of Amari Cooper. I didn't draft a lot of Deshaun. With some of with the way I tend to draft, it does tend to pair up like that. Like I have to really like the QB to really draft the wide receiver, especially with how high some of these receivers go. Amari Cooper, I didn't draft a lot of Amari Cooper, similar to Joe Burrow. I think I might have Amari Cooper on like one team. I didn't draft a ton of him because I didn't really trust Deshaun. The Jerome Ford situation is similar to a Rashad White situation. I'm going to tell you how, in my opinion. So when you have guys like this that are getting so much of the opportunities, they're getting so many touches, James, so many touches that they got to fall into the end zone at some point just because of the sheer number of touches that they're getting. They're getting the volume of touches. So that means basically if you're looking at a Browns game and you're trying to see the over-under for that game, or they're projecting the Browns, even if they projected them to score like 18 points or something crazy, I will figure that Jerome Ford will at least have one of those because, I mean, Deshaun Watson, his throwing ability doesn't seem to be great. I mean, I'm hoping – I can't really even say I'm hoping he shakes it off. I don't care if the guy shakes it off at all, to be honest with you. No love lost for the Browns over here. So I don't care. He can continue to suck. I just hand the ball to Jerome. Give Jerome his 25 touches, and then I'll be good. And I'm banking pretty much on the amount of touches, James, with a Jerome Ford. I'm just banking on you're going to get a lot of and he gets some receiving work. He'll have some receptions. So Jerome Ford, he gets some receptions, and he's a guy that I feel will get goal line work for them. So I like Jerome Ford in that regard. Not saying he's all of a sudden, he's not CMC, which we should be talking about that as well because that ruined my life. He's not CMC or somebody that you put into a top tier level of running backs all of a sudden, but I believe he's a decent starter because I like running backs because of their floor. The running backs have a decent floor, even if it's only 10 or 15. They rip one, they can make something out of that. With wide receivers, if you're not getting the targets, have you seen with some of these great wide receivers? If you don't get the targets, then your week is done.
I see the Hawk is here.
The
Good
Hawk,
morning,
bring them
sir.
in.
How
What's
you
going
doing?
on, my friend? Bring in the professionals. I was warming it up for you, man. I'm just over here rambling, waiting for you to come on and give us your fantasy knowledge and tell me what I'm going to do about CMC ruining my life this week.
Oh man, what a week already. CMC, T. Higgins, now Ken Walker, so many guys who are already on the shelf.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, we were talking about some of the quarterbacks, man. But now that you're here, let's talk about the game that me and Reggie are both dreading because my team looked like shit, but we did have 6 field goals. I guess that's the and we won the game.
I mean,
yeah.
if you got Boswell, then it's amazing. If you got Boswell, if you have anybody else, then it's terrible.
Boswell could be MVP this year. He's going to be
So let's talk about those two quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins and Justin Fields. Just 156 yards passing. Really? Are you kidding me? Come on. Seriously? You got Najee Harris, 88 yards.
I'll take that for Najee, to be honest with you. I mean, that's not a bad Najee game.
No. But when you go in expecting 8 points from your running back, I mean, come on, yeah. But this week that might be viable. But Chris, what's up? I mean, do you keep running Kirk Cousins out there. You got a second start for Justin Fields. I'm a Steeler fan, but I'm not running none of the Steelers
None
out
of these guys out there, right? Absolutely.
I mean, can you play? You drafted him high, but what can you expect from a Bijan? What can you expect from a Pat Freiermuth or a Kyle Pitts?
So
I'm just frustrated here, Chuck. Talk to me.
So I think a couple different teams and a couple questions. Let's take it one at a time. So Atlanta, I think they're going to be better. I think there's this kind of weird thing that has happened in the NFL, and I think you guys are, I hope, closer to my age, so probably remember. But people used to play preseason. NFL teams used to play.
Yes, absolutely.
Start a preseason, they play at least a quarter for the starters. By the end of preseason, they're playing a half, sometimes 3 quarters. Now there are teams that do not play their starters the entire preseason. And so, I mean, you're looking at an Atlanta team that basically has never played together. I didn't play the preseason. They've never played with their quarterback. And they went up against a vicious Pittsburgh defense. So I think it's possible, and I think we've talked about that the Atlanta offense might be overrated. People might have been a little bit too hyped on him. But I'm also not selling after 1 week. I think you got to give them another week together. I think that they're going to have to face some worse defenses than Pittsburgh. And I think that Bijan will be fine. I'm a little more concerned about London and Pitts, but I think they'll be better than they've been. I wouldn't necessarily want Cousins to be my starting quarterback, but I think he'll still be an upgrade over runner. So that's Atlanta. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts. Then I can give my take on Pittsburgh.
I will co-sign the Bijan thought there. I think Bijan is fine. London, who is my guy, who I really need to produce for me, I'm a little bit more worried about. When you look at what Kirk Cousins has done in the past, from the amount of yards he's put up, you know that he can support a few guys. He can support with Kirk Cousins and the amount of yards he typically puts up. He can support a couple guys out there. So it's interesting to see what happened the first game. I watched some Kirk Cousins press conferences. He doesn't seem to be worried about it. So I'm not worried about it, but Bijan is definitely looks like a solid pick so far.
Yeah, they're going to run. They're better coached. They're going to use their weapons. They just need some time together.
Yeah, well, Reggie's high on Arthur Smith, so I guess you can go ahead.
I cannot stand that man. Absolutely. You know how I feel about it.
If you've listened to Chef and I talk at all, you know that we are big Arthur Smith fans. I say that just sarcastically. Ironically enough, should be good for Najee and Jaylen Warren, maybe.
Right.
They're going to run. It's funny. So Justin Fields is one of these players who is a better fantasy than NFL player, and I think that better days are ahead for him. If you have him on your fantasy team, if you need a quarterback, he's going to run. I think he'll develop that chemistry with Pickens. He's a good deep threat. If you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I'm sorry.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And do you think what a person like Justin Fields is in particular, and because me and James were talking about this with other quarterbacks, I forgot, James, what quarterback. I think at the top of the show we were talking about certain quarterbacks, and I was like, we were talking about Aaron Rodgers. So we'll talk about Justin Fields in the situation too. How many people have to be in your league, Hawk, to start these guys as your quarterback? To start an Aaron Rodgers or a Justin Fields? And I would start probably, the Justin Fields, I like the rushing upside, but I just like Aaron Rodgers so much more as a quarterback. I like Garrett Wilson so much more as a receiver. So I would lean towards starting Aaron Rodgers between the two, but he doesn't have the rushing upside as Justin Fields. How deep does your league have to be starting these guys at quarterback?
I think pretty deep. I think that, hopefully, even in like a 12, 14 team league, you probably have a halfway decent other option who played better last week.
Yeah, agreed.
Now I like Justin Fields. I like him as a speculation pick. If you're in best ball, or if you have him, don't cut him. Just leave him on your bench. He's produced 20 points per game the last 2 seasons. I think he's got a good shot to do it again in Pittsburgh, but definitely a situation where I want to see him do that before he's in my starting lineup. The only situation I'm starting him is if I'm in a league where I really waited on quarterback. And maybe it's a 14-team league, but I didn't get the 14th quarterback. Maybe a couple other guys jumped in and took their backups before I got the quarterback 16 or 17, then maybe I'm thinking about starting Justin Fields out of desperation.
Yeah, well, a lot of people start quarterbacks for matchups too. So you might have thought that you had a good
Just
matchup.
streaming QB.
Yeah. But like you said, Chuck, unless you're in a best ball situation, uh, I'm not sure, or a 14-team situation. But let's, Chuck, you got to talk about the Dolphins for us. What do we do with Tua? If Skyler is going to be your guy going forward, what do you do with Waddle? Is it an HN workhorse type deal? Do you trust your tight ends? What do you do if you got Dolphins on your roster there, Chuck?
I'm scared. I mean, we've seen what they did last year with Skylar Thompson. Tyreek is somewhat quarterback proof. I think he'll be fine. I think the upside is diminished versus what he was doing with Tua. I think Waddle, it scares me. Now I'm going to admit I'm biased. We've all had this happen. I had him in fantasy last year and it was not a good year for him. So I went in this year already skeptical. So
yeah,
I'm going to be the first person to admit I'm biased. I've got a personal bias because of how he personally hurt me. But so I think he's a little downgraded with Skylar Thompson. I think if anything, the upshot here is the running backs. I think that they will. McDaniels is smart. I think they already like to run the ball, but I think they'll have an almost more. If you look at like what Shanahan did with Jimmy Garoppolo, even like Nick Mullins and others, or Brock Purdy when he was first getting started, before he sort of adapted. I think McDaniels, he was a Shanahan disciple, obviously was an assistant coach with the Niners. So I think he will lean more on the running game. And for Achane, if Mostert comes back healthy, maybe even for Jalen Wright or Wilson, you're going to see more opportunity.
What about Wilson in this scenario?
It scares. Admittedly, Wilson got banged up in the game, so who knows if he played the entire game. Obviously, the game script was also poor as they fell behind, but the Dolphins actually seem pretty happy to use Achane as a workhorse running back.
Yeah,
first half.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What do you think,
especially given size? Given size, it seems crazy for the long run because you don't usually see backs the size of Achane get that kind of usage over a 17-game season.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see if they continue that at the clip that they are right now with Achane, especially coming off of what we had an ankle scare. Then the guy goes out there and goes off. I hope everybody started him because he goes out there and just destroys. But it's interesting because I had the same opinion about you. Waddle definitely was my same guy that I was worried about more so. Feel like he'll, like you, I feel like he'll, because of target share, because of jet sweeps and all the other stuff that he can do, because all the things that he can do, I'm not as scared for Hill as I would be for Waddle for sure.
Chuck, take us through the Green Bay situation.
That is equally scary. I mean, if you watch Malik Willis either in the two plays in Green Bay or any of the games the last couple of years that he played in Tennessee, he has never looked like an NFL quarterback. It's, I hate to say it because there's not a lot of great situations, but one thing I will look at a little bit when I'm drafting, especially my top players, is who's the backup quarterback. Because when it comes to injuries, everyone always thinks about, well, of course, it's terrible. If my player gets hurt, that's awful. But I have seen players get just sapped of all value when the starting quarterback goes down. Rarely is the backup great, but you do have situations where the backup is at least like acceptable. Or you think, okay, if the guy goes down, he'll be okay. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like guys like Jalen Reed. I like Josh Jacobs normally, but maybe Jacobs is fine if they just run the ball more. But I think it's a scary situation to Love comes back.
Let's see who else was kind of scary here. Buffalo won, as you said, but I got less than 10 points from Josh Allen.
Didn't need him. They put up 30 without him.
Yeah, but I understand that. But I mean, the knock before the season was who was going to be Josh's wide receivers.
Yeah.
So who do you look for points? Are these guys going to be able to sustain these points, or are we going to have to start looking for Josh Allen to again give us those 2 touchdowns, and 2 passing TDs? What's your thoughts on the supporting cast of Allen?
Is that Reggie? Do you want to jump in on this
That's
one?
you. That's
Me?
you.
Okay. I think it's fine. I think what you're seeing in Buffalo, though. So first, let's level set one thing. Josh Allen threw 19 passes last night, on Thursday night. Last season, he averaged 34 per game. So I know there's some Kincaid owners. I know there's some Shakir owners, some Coleman owners who are panicked. And I think there's a little bit of over panic. I actually think when they're throwing in the first half, Shakir and Kincaid in particular looked really good. Start out the game well. And I think game script, the defensive touchdown, the 47-yard touchdown run from Cook threw off the cadence a little bit. That said, I think what you're seeing out of Buffalo is also how the season's going to go, which is that they're going to run more, which they did towards the end of last year. And they're also going to spread the ball around. So I don't know that Josh Allen's going to have a Stephon Diggs type receiver where he locks in and throws 160 targets. I think he's going to throw to a mix of all of those receivers and some more receptions for Cook. So you'll get some good games out of Shakir. Kincaid will be just fine as a tight end. But if you drafted Kincaid to be there's some people who thought he would be kind of a wide receiver 1, but at the tight end position, getting 160 targets. And I think from what we've seen, that's probably not going to be happening. But if you're kind of okay with a season where he probably gets 850 yards and 5 to 10 touchdowns, depending a little bit on luck, I think he'll be just fine.
I had Coleman myself, and I have Coleman in a few different leagues. I did drop him in our league, my home league today, for Zamir White, because I saw Zamir White sitting on the waivers. Oh. So I was like, I gotta switch out Zamir for Coleman, man. Like, you kidding me? I just had to do it. I'm pretty decent at wide receiver depth, but it did worry me putting up that goose egg, because I think going into that game, I think a lot of us were salivating at the matchup, thinking that these guys are going to put up 50, 60 points. It's going to be a shootout. It's going to be a shootout. He's going to have to throw the ball, and we just got something very different. And Shakir was kind of hyped coming into the season. I think when you own one of the guys and you look at the other guy that was kind of hyped coming into the season, it can give you some concerns if you have games that kind of substantiate those fears early, right? So if you're thinking like, it was Coleman or Shakir, which one do you take? That was kind of through draft season. That was kind of what was happening. And I think towards the end of draft season, I saw Coleman going a little bit higher than Shakir towards the end of draft season. But that fear of Shakir being the guy is substantiated by Coleman owners if you go through at least a second game. Coleman got more of the targets the first game, but Shakir was still there. He wasn't like nothing.
No.
And then you look at this game, and then you start to get like, oh man, did I take the wrong guy? But I think the split of target share makes more sense for what you were saying. So I don't see any of these guys having Stephon Diggs type of talent yet.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, I think Coleman was a good pick, right? It's you're flipping the dice. As late in the draft as you get him, you're kind of saying,
correct,
I'm going to flip the dice if Coleman is a guy like OBJ, right? If he comes out, if it's like a Jamar Chase, there's 1 or 2 rookie receivers every year that go off. And if it's Coleman, and if he gets 160 targets, you've gotten basically, top 3 round talent in like the 8th, 9th, 10th round. So the pick was good, but part of fantasy is also knowing when to cut bait. And I think as you did, be willing to not kind of have that sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of cutting bait, and it was only the first game, this game was ugly as hell. I don't know, maybe, and I guess one of the reasons why I was so appalled at this game is because it was our regional game over here for some reason, the 10 o'clock game. Chicago versus the Titans.
Ugly, man. Goodness.
Well, is there a fantasy silver lining anywhere here except for maybe the Chicago defense?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a Tennessee fan, I'm scared. I've never been a big Levis fan, and obviously he could make me look dumb tomorrow. I think that Tennessee offense will have better days against worse defenses, but there's not a lot of fantasy talent to mine out of there. Now for Chicago, I'm going to kind of give him a pass for week one. Caleb Williams looked good in the preseason against Philly defenses, but he's a rookie in his first game, rookie quarterback. Completely reasonable that he had the jitters. I think there's a lot of offensive talent on that team. Still like DJ Moore, still like Keenan Allen, or if Allen gets banged up or gets a little too old, still like Rome once he gets healthy again. Uh, Swift obviously should be better. So I think they have too good of an offense to be this bad. So I'm giving them a pass till I see the game tomorrow.
Yeah, 93 yards is ridiculous. There's no way, right? No way Caleb comes out and puts up 93 again. That's not even you had running backs that had more yards. So it's kind of like I don't think Caleb's that bad. Let's just say that.
I'm going to be honest. Make me an NFL quarterback. I could get 93 yards. It would be like hiking and throwing the ball to like Justin Jefferson or something immediately.
Right. 180-yard run. You're already there. You're most of the way there,
I could get 93, and Caleb Williams is significantly better than me. So there's going to be better days ahead for the Bears fans.
Okay. The Bungles. Joe Burrows. Well, you got Chase finally got his bag, I think. So
I didn't know he got paid.
Did you call him the Bungles? That's probably the perfect name.
Yeah, that's what I thought. In our division, we had the Bungles, the Ratbirds, and the Clowns.
Only the Steelers. The Steelers are the only team that are respectable enough to have their name spoken on the show, I guess.
Look, I'm a Niners fan. You see back here. I'll still say the Sea Chickens to this day for a team in Seattle.
So, T. Higgins is out again. What's up?
I mean, again, I'm going to give him till week 2. I know Burrow's coming back off. He had kind of an off year last year and was banged up and had injuries. So we'll see by week 2.
He was grabbing that elbow a significant amount of times for me.
It's starting to scare me. The situation does scare me. Is this going to be a lingering issue for Burrow? Is he okay? Obviously, Chase is held out. That's scary. And then T. Higgins, I'll tell you, I had T on multiple fantasy teams, and another CMC-like situation where it looked like he's good to go for week 1, and then at the last second, now he's out for multiple weeks. So it was going to be a wide receiver too for a couple of my teams, and now I've had to scramble and start some other players. So we're used to the Bengals having a high-powered offense. I still want to see them in week 2 before I really panic, but I will say there are some very real red flags there that have me concerned.
Yeah, for sure.
Staying in the division. What about the Clowns and Watson?
The Clowns and where?
Watson, Deshaun Watson.
It's pretty much the Cleveland Clowns is what he's referencing here, and that's terrible as well. A lot of from one terrible situation to another.
It's great. It's great for us. I mean, I'm loving it. I mean, we're the top of the division. We're 1-0. I'm but hey, it can't be like that every week. I mean, So
it's got to get better in Cleveland. They've got largely the same team as last year when Watson was playing. Obviously, Flacco was in at the end of the year when they kind of had the miracle run. I don't think they're a great team, but I don't think they're this bad of a team. I think that if you took Ford as a late flyer, he showed some talent last year. Will have better days. I've been a bit of an evangelist of Cooper's, a guy who I thought was going way too low in drafts, and he's had amazing chemistry with Watson. His numbers just with Watson last season would have put him on pace for about 1,500 yards and 8 touchdowns. So, again, they played a really tough defense, obviously had a bad game this last week. I'm giving another week or 2. I think there's better days ahead. I don't think as an NFL team they're going to be particularly good, but I think that they're going to throw the ball enough that if you have certain guys like Ford or Cooper, they're going to be just fine. Obviously, losing to Juku's a big loss for them in fantasy players, though.
For sure.
Let's talk about a game that I thought was a very good game, and I was kind of surprised, but not disappointed, and that was the Texans and the Colts. What did you think about Anthony Richardson's first game back? And were you surprised at the C.J. Stroud performance?
I mean, Anthony Richardson looked phenomenal, and I'll be honest, I was a little bit skeptical of him.
Me too.
Reggie, what did you think about Anthony coming into the season?
I think he's getting drafted very high. When you look at the quarterbacks that he was going, I think James, we talked about this at the beginning of the show also. When you look at the quarterbacks first, like a Aaron Rodgers versus an Anthony Richardson, one may be a better real life quarterback, but one is a much better fantasy prospect, and that's Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson is pretty much Joe Montana from a fantasy standpoint. The guy gives you the long ball. Now I think if there's any concerns about Richardson, is the lack of attempts and the lack of completions. Like, you're not seeing a guy who went out there and just tore it up. He had a couple of really long balls, which you really like, depending on how the scoring goes in your league. In my league, it's an insane amount of scoring, and I played the guy, and he killed me. So there was an insane amount of scoring for that long ball, and he gives you that. He gives you the rushing. I don't see what's not to like besides just the injury skepticism. You know, okay, that's kind of what I had. I had injury skepticism, but the guy was getting drafted pretty high. I felt like I drafted a poor man's Richardson because I got Jaden Daniels very, very late in the draft, and it's proven to pay dividends for me. I'm running him out there every week if I can.
He looked phenomenal.
Phenomenal, right? Yeah, and I feel like he's a poor man's Anthony Richardson until I see how that develops because of Anthony Richardson's size. But guys, remember, his size was talked about last year, and remember how quick he got injured last year. So his size was talked about coming into the league last year as being a plus. He got injured pretty quickly.
Well, as someone who's had some running quarterbacks in the past, like Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson's kind of the exception. He's strong, he's durable, he's smart about how he runs. I always just say with running quarterbacks, have a good backup. Enjoy the bounty. Kind of an interesting factoid. I think most people know this conceptually, but they may not fully get it. But Chef has talked about on our pod that if you want to think about running quarterback versus passing quarterbacks, if you have a running quarterback, Jaden Daniels last week was obviously played even better, but was projected. If you looked at the Vegas lines or some of the projections, he was projected for 140 yards, 150 yards passing and 40 rushing yards. Those 10 points are the equivalent of a quarterback that throws for 350 yards.
Woo! Yikes!
I don't when he said that, it makes sense. When you hear it, you're like, whoa.
Goodness gracious. Yikes, man.
So those running quarterbacks are a major advantage. Anthony Richardson, I was a little skeptical because of his passing, but he was throwing phenomenally. So if you draft a Richardson, congratulations. He looks fantastic. That Indy team looks really good. The only thing as an owner of this player that scares me a little bit is Jonathan Taylor. His running is fine, but Taylor's proven to be a good pass-catching back as well. And I noticed this a little bit last year, but it's a 2-game sample. Once again this year, I think Anthony Richardson, when his options aren't there, he runs. He doesn't check down to his running back. So Taylor's still a phenomenal runner. He'll still be good. But if he's getting half a reception a game instead of 2.5 receptions a game, really takes one of his dimensions away.
You guys mentioned him, so let's talk about him. Jalen Daniels, is there any, brand new guy, like you said.
So far.
The rest of the Commanders didn't look like any fantasy type. You always got the scary Terry, but
B-Rob is respectable at the back position back there. I like B-Rob.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on the Commanders?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, look, Daniels is going to throw the ball as well as running. He's going to pass for some yardage. It may not be even CJ Stroud type yardage from last year, which is something to be a bit concerned about. I think similar to what we talked about with Keon Coleman, it's a good gamble to grab a couple commanders and see if one of them, on your bench can develop into something. But I was wondering kind of coming into this year, because people kept saying someone on Washington's got to catch the ball. I went back and looked at a couple of the other running quarterbacks in their rookie years. I'm going to go a little bit old school here, but Robert Griffin III, when he came in and had that phenomenal year on Washington. Yeah, and also on Washington.
Yeah.
And, I don't think when I looked at they didn't have a single pass catcher who went I want to say it was over 600 yards, but definitely over 800 yards. So
brutal.
Just could be a situation where, yes, he's going to throw the ball, but he's going to run, and they might just spread around, and there may not be that kind of one player like Terry, Sanat, McCaffrey. There may not be that one player who dominates. With that said, you want to stash one of those guys on your bench, kind of hope that they emerge. Good gamble.
I like Terry, but I like McLaurin there as the closest thing. But I think that what you said is true in a sense of, especially with rookies there, I think their natural inclination is to run the ball. So you're not going to see a lot of checks down. You're not going to see them waiting for guys to get downfield. The guy's either got to be pretty open or the rookie's already taken off. He's already started running.
Yep.
So I feel like with those rookie quarterbacks, especially rushing rookie quarterbacks, you got to temper expectations for their wide receivers.
And it's hard. I mean, if you guys have played football, if you play quarterback in any league where there's rushers, with me it was just flags. So I didn't even have a guy threatening to tackle me. You start seeing a guy coming at you, you do more than a 2-step drop. These guys are in your face, and that takes some time to adjust for these rookies because it's even a step or two faster in the NFL than in college.
Speaking of rookies, and the only reason I want to talk about this is because we play them this week. But what did you think about Bo Nix against your Sea Chickens?
Man, if I can make another old reference, Bo may not know diddly, but he knows his interceptions. So yeah. For youngins watching the show, it's an old Bo Jackson commercial. Was it? You guys remember? Was it Nike who did that campaign?
Yeah, it was Nike. Bo knows, man. Absolutely took over. That campaign took over for a while there, man.
It was one of my. I think I was like the right age as a kid when that came out. It was one of my favorites. I had that Bo Jackson poster in my room where he had the football gear with the baseball.
But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'm sorry to segue from your question for a second, but man, for any of the younger people watching this show, go Google, watch some YouTube highlights of Bo Jackson. Him and Deion Sanders. Feels like he used to have more athletes that played two sports professionally, but Bo Jackson was just elite at both football and baseball. Absolute shame what happened to his knee, right? I think it was his knee that got torn up.
Yeah, injuries, man, for sure.
But to get actually back to your question, look, Nix is a rookie. I almost never draft rookie quarterbacks. Stroud is a really rare exception last year, and that he was good. And even Stroud, I think, for as good as he was, he threw for only about 4,000 yards, which I know is still good, but he wasn't. I think he finished somewhere around quarterback 10 or 12. So he was good, but he wasn't elite. And I think that's kind of the upside for rookie, other than guys who get a ton of running yards. So for passing quarterbacks, look, I think the Broncos are going to be a mess in general as a team. And in fantasy, I'm not putting Nix out as a starter anytime soon.
Goodness gracious. I'm going to get out of here after this, guys. But, the Bo Nix, I came into the season thinking that he was going to be better than what he looked like. In preseason, he looked pretty good. He looked like a guy that's going to fit into Sean Payton's system pretty nicely. The kind of guy that Sean Payton wanted. Sean Payton didn't want a guy going off a script. He wanted a guy who's going to run the plays that he wants to run. And Bo Nix, like a prototypical quarterback for his system, looked excellent during preseason. I think he's going to be better, but the problem with Bo Nix is even if Bo Nix, he would have to almost develop into a Drew Brees before I would start him. That's because of the kind of quarterback he is. Because of the kind of quarterback he is, he would need extreme passing volume before I would even think about starting him. Because like you said, the guy could pass for 250, 300 yards and still be a bum in fantasy somehow. So it's kind of like, from a fantasy perspective, I don't want to run him out there. I'm going to get my final thoughts real quick, James, as I get out of here. To us CMC owners, it'll be okay, guys. Mason got us through the first week. We're hoping, praying to God, praying to the fantasy gods that Because is CMC going to IR? I heard CMC might go on IR today. I hear it's a good chance.
That is
Oh, guys, it hurts. It hurts my soul to draft this man the first time I ever get a chance to draft CMC.
Yep.
Actually, my second time. I passed on him last year because for fear of injury. He comes out and crushes. I get a chance to take him again this year. Of course, I can't pass him on again and look like an idiot again. So I take him this year, and this is what happens. It's devastating, but I'm hoping that Mason gets us through it for fellow CMC owners here.
Well, Reggie, you missed, all the research I know you do, all the data at your fingertips. You missed one of the most important variables with CMC this year, which is he was on the cover of Madden, and that is something that
and I have it too. I should have known. I should have known.
The game.
I had Madden way before my draft. I should have known. Like, you know what? I'm gonna be factoring in my Madden curse next year, guys. I'm not. They're not getting me a third time, man. I'm gonna factor it in, and I'm gonna be right next year, guys. Enjoy the rest of your show.
Thank you,
Reggie. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, see you next time.
Yeah. Chris. So, hey, man. Let's use this time to let's call it a smash up commercial here.
Awesome.
Tell us a little bit about how things went that first week. Of course, I got in and got my feet wet. I wasn't sure about how to use my cards. You can tell us, kind of explain and go through that for us. And let's get some more players over here to Smash Up Sports.
Excellent. I'm pulling up a little bit from our league last week, seeing if I can pull up some of our week one lineups. I don't know if maybe I can stream real quick. My team, I didn't do pretty well. I think you're beating me, James. So real quick, I guess for free listeners. So Smash Up Sports, we're a fantasy platform like Yahoo or Sleeper, and essentially it's a game where you have a traditional fantasy team. You pick using a salary cap. But on top of that, you get to play Smash cards. And these Smash cards, if you're a fantasy fan or if you play DFS, they're essentially like player props. So they can be things like Hail Mary. If your quarterback throws a 50-yard pass, or completes one, I should say, then you get 30 extra fantasy points. Or you could play one where it doubles your running back score, one where you get a point for every incompletion that a quarterback throws. So not only can you capitalize on good things that happen, but if you, let's say, went cheaper at the quarterback position and started Bo Nix, you could play a card on him like Goldfish Memory, where instead of getting -2 points for every turnover, you get 8 points added to your score. So it's a chance to use these cards, use your knowledge of the game, and everything is free. So it's free to play. The cards you choose using a salary cap, so you can choose, 2 really good ones or a handful of good but not great ones, completely your ability to use some strategy and your knowledge. And so we've got a SPORTSKRIB league, and last week, if I can present and share screen here, let me see.
You should be able to share.
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen for the listeners here. So I didn't do a very good job in our league last week. I started Justin Fields, we talked about earlier. I started Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey. Oh, I didn't have a chance to switch him out before game time, so that's part of where I went wrong. Brian Thomas Jr. And Waddle were good value picks receiver for me. Jonnu Smith completely did nothing for me. I was going cheaper at tight end. You can see really where I spend my money was at running back. That's where I focused my cards. I played a card here, Hellacious Halfback, that gives you extra points on all your running backs, but takes your quarterback score down. So I went cheaper with Fields, went big on my running backs. Obviously didn't work out so well for me. If I go back here and look at the leaderboard last week, or at least go to James's team. James, you did pretty good here. You outscored me by about 30 points, and looks like you crushed it with Saquon Barkley. So you had Barkley, you had Stroud, Achane, and Connor. So I've got some catching up to do this week.
Yeah, I did do pretty good with my running backs. but it is kind of like the cards. You have so many options. It's like, do I do this one or do I do that one? Like you said, like you can, if you got a quarterback that sucks, you can bet on the fact that he's going to throw 2 or 3 interceptions. So yeah, the cards were crazy. I was kind of like a kid in the candy shop. The vulture card. There's so many different ones you can play.
Yeah, and so here I'll show you guys too. I have lineups that are just for my own fun. I'm not eligible to win anything, obviously, as a co-founder. But we have a weekly tournament. Again, free to enter. Doesn't cost a cent. You don't give us a credit card. There's no pay-to-win mechanics. So again, you're not like purchasing the cards or anything. Everyone has access to the same cards. Everyone has the same salary cap. But we do have some prizes to make it a little bit more fun. So first place gets $1,000, about $1,500 in prizes total. And to show you here, I made this lineup real quick yesterday for a social media post. Let me remove it real quick, and we can just kind of show you a quick example of this. We won't go through the entire lineup for time, but this is what we're talking about. You've got your player budget, you've got your card budget. So I can come in here, I can look at all the quarterbacks, and who do you like this week, James? Who should we show your listeners how we're slotting them in?
For quarterback this week, I think I took. Let's see, who did I take? Oh, I took Josh Allen, I believe.
Okay, well, so the Thursday game has started, but because you can pick from the whole player pool, even if you didn't get him by the Thursday game, you can still set your lineup. Technically, you can set your lineup before the Monday night game starts, although you only have access to Monday night players. So obviously, you don't see Josh Allen here still, but you still see all the players this weekend. So because we talked about him, I could play Jaden Daniels at quarterback. I could come over at running back and choose, Saquon again, maybe because I want to go a little bit cheaper on my second running back. So I'm going to scroll down here. I actually know this week from the pricing, because the prices were made before they talked about CMC being out. Jordan Mason's a really good value pick. So again, I won't set the full lineup. I think people get the gist of that. It's just like a lot of DFS games. Then I come over to the cards. I can look at the quarterback cards. Here's one for Jaden Daniels scramble spikes, where your quarterback basically gets extra points for all their rushing yards. So really good one if you have Jaden Daniels. I'm going to use $2,000 of my $12,000 card budget, put that on Jaden. Whereas for Saquon, I might use something like, I'll go a little more expensive, use something like Bruising Bell Cow, where every rushing attempt is worth 1 point. So pretty straightforward how this stuff works. And I could do that for the rest of my lineup, staying within the salary cap. So starting to get pretty big. We've got a bunch of leagues people are playing in. Only plug I'll make for the leagues here is that obviously week 1 has started. So if you're used to season-long leagues, maybe you're not going to start a season-long league after week 1. But with our leagues, if you want to create one, you can create it for any length of time. And the way it works is not head-to-head. It's points. So you add up the points, and the most points wins. So maybe you just want to test it out. Maybe you don't want to commit to a full season yet because it's new to you. But you can always jump in here and say, you know what? I just want to try. I'm going to play a little 3-4 week tournament with my friends. We're going to try it out. We're going to, for 4 weeks, who can score the most points and just have some fun. So anyway, a lot of cool things to do here. A lot of ways to do this. So appreciate the time to share that. And we've got a promo code SPORTSKRIB. So everything is free. If you're a listener and you put SPORTSKRIB in when you register, you get some extra perks, like an extra lineup for the weekly game. And we have a SPORTSKRIB league. So maybe, James, if you drop the league in the chat or in the description, your listeners can come and join and have a chance to play against us.
Definitely. And that's what's the site again?
Thank you. Don't want to leave that out. It is SmashUpSports.com. So again, SmashUpSports.com. Okay.
All right. Couple minutes here. I want to take up your time before we get out of here. Your lineups this week. of course, we we had the New England upset. Uh, do you factor that into this week's game, New England's matchup? Uh, what's your thoughts on? Uh, well, let's start with our sit-ems this week, guys that we want to get away from this week.
Yeah. So in terms of my sit-ups for the week, one moment, pulling up my thoughts. So I'm sitting. I'm still sitting basically any of the New England receivers. I'm still sitting any of the LA players outside of Cooper Cup. In that situation without Nakua, I don't fully trust Stafford. I don't fully trust. I know Demarcus Robinson has been a popular pickup. He's a guy I want to see, actually be successful and do it for a week first. In terms of some of the other matchups, I'm liking New York a bit. I'm still not starting anyone from Tennessee. I think the New York defense is tough, so I'm still not starting Ridley. I know Pollard had a good week last week, but I'm not rolling him out of my lineup unless I don't have a better option. So those are some of the guys who I am sitting. James, who's on your list?
I am definitely sitting the anyone that I have from the Titans. I don't necessarily. It's not so much about the matchup as it is about what I saw from the players last week. Um, of course, even though I think we have a favorable matchup, I am sitting most of my Steelers because I have better options, actually. I'm sitting anyone from uh, not Jacksonville, the other team, uh, Carolina.
Oh, they look like a mess last week, didn't they?
Yeah. So yeah, I see no value in their players whatsoever. That's another interesting situation. How long do you think they can sustain this dumpster fire?
Not long. I'm going to be honest. I don't want to overstate this. It wasn't like I didn't draft Bryce Young in any leagues. I think maybe as a third quarterback in one best ball draft. So I don't want to act like it's overly bullish on him. But I did think last year, as bad as he was for number one pick, he wasn't awful for a rookie. Like, if he had been a fourth round pick and put up the numbers he did, 60% completion percentage, a couple thousand yards, looked a little bit better later in the season. I think, people would have been a little bit more intrigued by him coming into this year. I thought they improved the offensive line. I thought they're going to take a step forward. And again, I don't want to overly panic. Week one is a crazy week. I remember a couple times the Patriots got blown out in week one during their dynasty, and everyone said, that's it. It's the end of the dynasty. And then, of course, starting week two, they start steamrolling every team. But I was really disappointed by Bryce Young and Carolina. I thought Bryce would take another step forward this year. And obviously did not happen in week one. That's another team I'm really looking at in week two. And I'm not going to pull the plug yet. I think they deserve another week to show as a fluke. But what do you think, James? Because I'm scared of them right now.
Oh, as I said, I don't see any matchup where I would trot any of them out there. Um, Bryce Young's first pass was an interception. I don't. I hate to say it, but that just might be a preview of his season. But I'm gonna. I really like the 49ers, and
Yes.
one of my sure starts, and I was able to get him late. Is Brock Purdy.
Yes.
I think to me, like when you go a must start, I think if you have Brock Purdy, if you look at his numbers, he's put up better numbers than both Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen.
Yep. He was phenomenal in week one. He was PFF's highest graded quarterback in week one. Now, to be fair, some of these other quarterbacks did all they needed to. Mahomes was going against a tough Ravens defense. Obviously, if I'm an NFL team, I'm still taking Mahomes. But Purdy, people keep doubting him because he was Mr. Irrelevant. And I don't know at what point people are going to say that it's not just a situation, that Purdy is actually a phenomenal quarterback.
Let's see. Speaking of this week now, and Thursday night's game, I got 26 points out of HN. And like you said, now is this guy a must start, especially with the absence of Tua?
Absolutely. I think when we're talking about this a little in the show, I think that Miami and Mike McDaniels are going to adapt. I think they're going to start running the ball even more. They're going to take a page out. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, McDaniels was an assistant for Shanahan. He comes from his coaching tree. Shanahan, if you look at what they did before Purdy really took off as a passer, both with Purdy as a rookie, but also with Garoppolo, with Nick Mullins, with Beathard, and some of the other players they had, they ran the ball really heavily and minimized passing. And I imagine that's what McDaniels will do. So I think HN is going to get all the volume he can handle. Given his size, the question how much he can handle. But I think they might try to get Jalen right up to speed. Hope Mostert comes back healthy. So I think absolute must start. I think the running backs will thrive in Miami.
Another sit-em for me is Zeke.
Yeah. I don't quite trust it. So why are you sitting Zeke, though?
Well, mostly because of the matchup and because, like you said, I don't really trust him coming back. And the running backs is not the strong suit for me as far as Dallas is concerned. I drafted wide receivers. I got Lamb, so I'd much rather start Lamb than Zeke. And I had my starters this week for running back were actually Etienne and James Conner.
Connor's a good one. It's always fun talking my starters because being in the industry, I'm in like 20 leagues, but one of my main ones, I'm fortunate enough this week to have both Cook and Etienne, so I'm going into Sunday's games feeling pretty good.
Yeah, like I said, I got Etienne and I got Conner instead of Cook. But what did you think about that Arizona team?
The game was a bit rougher last week than I was expecting. They're another team that I'm going to give a week to. They brought in a lot of new starters. It's going to take a little, they didn't play their starters in the preseason. As someone who's a little skeptical of rookies, but liked Marvin Harrison Jr., I was obviously disappointed with his performance. 1 catch for 4 yards. Obviously, there's that missed touchdown late where he broke free and Collar just didn't see him. I think he'll have better days. I think there's an offense that's going to be good. I think the interesting one out of Arizona that I'm watching is Dortch. I think he's a second-year player, a bit underrated, kind of came on strong towards the end of last year. Obviously, Zay Jones is out the first few games, so that could muddle the situation when he gets back. But Dortch has 4 games to establish himself, and at least for the first week, seemed to be Kyler Murray's favorite target. What were your thoughts?
I was actually thinking about Kyler Murray. My just like I call Aaron Rodgers ayahuasca. My pet term for Kyler Murray is the world's tallest midget. So I was a little concerned with the amount of targets for Harrison. I thought he'd be targeted more. Even though usually the rookie has those. I give him a 4 or 5 games before guys start getting enough tape to really look at to really feel them out. But I thought surprisingly you get good numbers usually from Arizona players if you're playing Kyler Murray or last year it was D-Hop. But you had 8 games where you didn't know what the hell they were going to do.
Yep.
So
it's interesting. Before people overly panic, though, and this is true for Arizona, it's true for a lot of other teams. A couple interesting facts from last week that have been out there, which is one, more than half the quarterbacks did not throw for 200 yards, which in a passing league is crazy. And then there were the fewest touchdowns thrown in a week last week since 2007. So I don't think that's going to be a pattern for the season. I don't think we're going back to a running league with no passing touchdowns. I think that collectively as fantasy owners, we need to take a deep breath. Don't panic yet. Realize it was week 1. I think coming out of this week, we're going to see a lot more that's going to start to look like patterns. We're going to start to have some real gems and some real players to panic about. So, look, if you want to roll the dice on a guy who had a good week 1 and hope it sticks, that's a great way. If you're right, it's a great way to do well in your league. But I wouldn't be panicking on players at this point. It was just a really crazy week 1.
Just talk about the tight end position. We had some guys that, as usual, we thought that they were going to do well. If you got Andrews, you were disappointed. But if you got Likely, you were good. There are some teams that are going to be getting away from, I think, the tight ends that we generally see, and we're going to see some young up-and-comers. Even though he didn't put up great numbers, I think as the season goes on, we'll have guys like Laporta, who was, went high in the draft. I liked what I saw from Kittle. I didn't like so much what I saw from Andrews. But what did you think about the tight ends going forward in this league, especially when you mentioned how low this first season was in passing touchdowns?
Yeah, I think my priors haven't moved a ton for the preseason. So I think that this looked like it was going to be a bit of a flatter year. It looked like there were a couple of guys you preferred to have, but there was as much separate. There was no, Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, Rob Gronkowski, prime Travis Kelce type of tight end where you said, if you have this tight end, you've got a massive advantage on the rest of your league. It was a bit flatter. I think that's still the case. I think that most tight ends played pretty poorly. As you said, Likely was the one exception, but most likely, and no pun intended there, if you had Likely, he was probably on your bench last week. Now people are going to put him in the starting lineup this week, and we'll probably get like 3 points out of him. I think Andrews will be better. It's how it goes, right? It's kind of up and down. Little side note, I call this I think what you're going to get with Likely and Andrews is kind of what Chef and I call the Glenn Galloway effect for some of the old timers here. Back in the day, Chef had a team where he had both Terry Glenn and Joey Galloway, who were both deep threats. And every single week he started one, and the player in the starting lineup gave him, 3-4 points. But the guy he put on the bench gave him 20 points. Because, you remember these guys, James, are both guys who would, have these massive games, but it would be 5 targets, 3 catches. All their catches were 30-plus yards. And so when they hit, they hit. Anyway, so I think those guys will be fine. I think guys like Kincaid will be fine. We talked about him already. McBride, I was a little cooler on him in the preseason just because his best weeks last week were when all the receivers were out, when Connor was out, and he was getting, 9 to 14 targets per game. As he comes back down to 6 to 8 targets, he's going to be good, but not as good as he was the middle of last season. So, look, I think you're going to have a lot of tight ends who kind of give you that 700 to 900 yards and 5 to 8 touchdowns. And that's going to be the position.
Now, I have a league where I do not have what I would call a starting defense. Most of what I considered the good defenses were gone before I took one in, I think, the 12th or 13th round, very late. But I wanted to ask you, what did you think about the strategy of starting what you consider a defensive matchup every week, such as this week? I think my must-start defense, if they were still there, and they were, I'm starting the Steelers defense against the Broncos.
Yeah, I mean, streaming is really viable, and I kind of like getting a defense a little bit earlier and just not having to worry about that over the course of the season. But I've had seasons, and I have friends who their strategy is to stream, and I think it's a strategy that can be rougher early in the season when more is unpredictable. Ironically, it's a strategy that works better late in the season if your team is doing well, because late in the season, not only do you have really bad teams, but some teams are trying to start their young players to give them experience. And some teams are actually, well, they will never admit this. They're kind of tanking because they want to get the top spot. So by the end of the year, there's usually a few teams that are just awful offensively, and you can stream against them. But even right now, I mean, you mentioned a good one with Pittsburgh. I love that call. And I think for me, same thing with the Chargers. Now, the Chargers might just have a good defense with Harbaugh, but whether they do or not over the whole season, they weren't drafted early. So if they're out there and you can start them against Bryce Young in Carolina, I feel like that's a pretty good bet. Or if you have to go even deeper, if you're listening to this, you need some advice. The Giants also look like a mess. So the Chargers might already be owned after last week, but you can probably go out there and pick up that Washington defense right now. They're probably not owned, and they're going up against the New York Giants and Daniel Jones. And I pretty much like any defense going against the Giants right now as well.
Must start running backs. Who are yours this week?
I'm must start is kind of interesting because, in a lot of leagues where you have your team already, you may not have a lot of depth on your bench. But whether it's that or whether you're playing on Smash Up like us and you're kind of picking your team with a salary cap, one guy I'm targeting heavily is Saquon. Was one of my obviously Saquon went in the first and second round or like early second in virtually every league in the draft. But I was even higher on him than that. I was targeting him everywhere I could get him. Way, way, way too early in the season after 1 week to take a victory lap, but he looked phenomenal. Running the ball, catching passes, with Kelsey gone and Philly probably wanting to diminish the odds of Hurts getting injured. The tush push did not happen in week 1. They gave the goal line carry to Saquon. So I'm starting Saquon. I think he could be the number 1 running back this year. Not to jinx him, so I'll knock on wood if he stays healthy. What about you, James?
I had Saquon in quite a few leagues, and I was high on Saquon. I thought that he would be phenomenal behind that Philadelphia line, and I was of course ecstatic with the performance that he gave me. So I'm starting Saquon, in every league that I have, but. Your number 2 is kind of where I think a lot of guys might be in a conundrum. After you get past that top tier of running backs, such as Saquon, Bijan, and those guys. Who are some of the guys that are your number 2 running backs? For instance, I just looking at my lineup, I have Ezekiel as 1. And I think I have Spears as another, simply because of Spears. I had projected him, and I guess most people, as the Titans' number one running back.
Well, let me talk. So, knowing how a lot of teams are, knowing the players they're debating, do I bench them? Do I start them? There's three guys I'll flag for the season that I looked good in week one. Two I would feel good starting this week. One I might keep on my bench. So one of those is Brian Robinson, and Reggie mentioned him earlier in the show when we were talking about Jaden Daniels. He looked really good. He looked like Eckler barely played 30 snaps. I think that Brian Robinson looked good. And I think that this week, again, going against a bad Giants team, not only will he play well if it's a close game and he get some carries and receptions, but if Washington blows out the Giants, which is a possibility, the game script may turn more towards running, which will favor Brian Robinson. So if he's the guy you're on the, you've got Elliott and Robinson, for example, you're debating which one to start. I like Brian Robinson. Another guy that I think people have been debating is Ramondre Stevenson. Now, after week one, people are probably really leaning towards starting him. Another guy I feel good about. The Seahawks defense has not been what it was in the past. I think you can start Stevenson with confidence. I think the Patriots are clearly featuring him. And I think whatever injuries were bugging him last year, at least for the moment, he's healthy. And then a third guy who I like coming off of last week, but I might be colder on given the matchup, is Zach Moss. A lot of talk in the offseason. Was Brown going to eat into Moss's? Bengals signed Moss. He was going to be the starter. But in training camp, there are questions. Is Brown going to eat into his carries? Is it going to be a split? Would Brown actually even? A little bit like that Keon Coleman, Shakir situation Reggie brought up earlier. Would Brown actually start to get drafted higher than Moss? Week one, Moss was clearly the featured back. I think he's a really good pickup going forward, a guy you can start. With that said, this week they play the Chiefs. Moss is probably still okay. He can catch some passes. But as we saw last week, even Derrick Henry was only okay. So I think that Chiefs defense is strong. And they have a very good chance the game turns into a blowout.
I got to ask you, because I look at this guy every season, and I said, okay, well, he doesn't really have any fantasy value. He has great football value. He's an asset for the team. But then you have a week where this guy is phenomenal. It's like Purdy just looks for him, and defenses forget all about him. You know who I'm talking about here, right?
Yeah.
Do you pick up Ayuk when you got guys like Zeke Elliott and Spears on the bench?
Different position, right? Because Ayuk is a receiver. So, I think if you have a chance to start him, you absolutely do. I know he had a little bit of a rough week one. He dropped a couple of passes, including a touchdown. But he had the holdout. He didn't play preseason. He's going to be fine going forward. I want to talk about the running back, though. I will say, every Shanahan running back puts up big numbers. Jordan Mason. There might be some people, if they didn't watch preseason, if they don't follow the Niners, might be wondering, okay, Mason looked really good last week. Obviously, he's a starting running back. I want him on my roster. But maybe if you're in a little bit more of a shallow league, you're wondering, do I start Mason or another guy I have? Or do I start him versus some receivers in the flex spot? Start him with confidence. Jordan Mason has looked phenomenal in the preseason, as well as in the regular season. Shanahan's number one running back is always a stud. The next guy they have is Isaac Guerendo, who is a rookie. Guerendo might take one or two carries, but not a threat to be a committee position at all. So absolutely take Mason. Although I will say, injuries do happen again. So Guerendo's a guy you might want to stash on your bench as next man up, as the potential number one running back for the Niners should Mason get hurt.
Okay. So any sleepers this week?
I think when we talk about sit 'em, start 'em, I've kind of hit on most of them. If they're flying under the radar, though, Zach Charbonnet, the backup running back in Seattle, Walker has been ruled out because he's starting. I don't know how much he qualifies as a sleeper, but maybe a guy who's not on everyone's radar. The old regime with Pete Carroll supposedly really liked him, and he was taking some carries away from Walker at the end of last season. Now he'll have the backfield to himself with Walker out. So if he's on the wire in your league, or if you already had him stashed on your bench, he's a guy I'd definitely be thinking about putting into my lineup.
All right. Well, hey, man, as always, it's good talking to you and getting some of our fantasy lineups taken care of. When is the next time you're going to be free and we can get another show going?
Well, I should be here with you next week, and then 2 weeks from now, I will be gone, as I will be in Las Vegas for a friend's birthday. So, but I will see you next week, and if that works.
All right, that works for us. So, you give us your final thoughts for the weekend, and as I said, give us that last plug for SmashUpSports. I'm down, man. You can see I'm there.
Well, final thoughts again, and just don't panic. Week 1, as we talked about, teams are not playing. A lot of teams are not even playing players in the preseason. It's been a trend that I've talked about before. So the last few years, Week 1 is almost a preseason game. So don't put too much faith in it. Give your players Week 2. Don't panic. Don't make a panic trade. Don't cut a player you really liked who had a bad Week 1 yet. Let's see what happens in Week 2. Again, half the quarterbacks didn't have 200 yards, fewest touchdown passes in a week since 2007. This week is going to be a whole different ball game. Going to be more shootouts, more of what we expected. Some of these guys, maybe like Harrison Jr., who had poor Week 1s, are going to look a lot better in Week 2. So give it this week. We're going to learn a lot more. And go over to SmashUpSports.com. Free to play, no entry fees, no pay to win. Play in a league. We actually have a Smash Up Public League where the winner gets a free jersey you can join. We have a weekly tournament where you can set a lineup, and if you win, you get $1,000, despite the fact that there's no entry fee. So come give us a try, give us a shot. Ton of fun. Again, that's SmashUpSports.com. And James, really looking forward to talking to you more next weekend.
All right, man. You have a great weekend. Hope everybody got some tips, and looking forward in my league. I'm looking forward to kicking some ass. So,
well, I hope you do. We'll talk about how it goes next week, and I'm hoping to kick some butt too.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend. Make sure you check out Smash Up Sports and the Sports Crib. Have a good one. See you next week.
See you next week.